Young girl loses her dream job to help elderly woman. 1 hour later, Mafia boss son arrives. The dim light cast long shadows across Margaret's apartment, making the once welcoming space feel like a trap closing in around Emma. Her fingers trembled as she heard the distinctive click of the door lock behind her. The sound echoed through her mind like a gunshot, final and terrifying. Just an hour ago, she'd been standing in her own apartment, smoothing down her silk blouse and preparing for the phone call that would change her life. The luxury hotel's hiring manager had practically guaranteed her the position. All she needed to do was show up for the final signature. But then Margaret had called, her voice frail and desperate. Now Emma's heart thundered against her ribs as she stared at the elderly woman who'd seemed so helpless on the phone. Margaret's demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the sweet, fragile neighbor. In her place stood someone calculating, watching Emma with keen eyes that held secrets darker than the shadows around them. The sound of heavy footsteps drew Emma's attention to the hallway. A man emerged from the darkness, his presence filling the room like smoke. Tall and imposing, dressed in an impeccable black suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary, he moved with the fluid grace of a predator. This was Luca Moretti, the man whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. Emma's throat went dry. She'd heard whispers about him, about the things he'd done. The Beast, they called him. Looking at him now, she understood why. His face was classically handsome, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. But his eyes were absolutely lethal. Dark and calculating, they pinned her in place like a butterfly to a board. So, his voice was deep, smooth like aged whiskey, but with an edge that made her shiver. "This is the one, Mother?" Mother. The word hit Emma like a physical blow. She looked between Margaret and Luca, seeing now the subtle similarities in their features. How could she have been so blind? "Yes, dear." Margaret's voice held a note of satisfaction that made Emma's skin crawl. "She's perfect, isn't she?" Emma took an instinctive step backward, her heel hitting the base of the wall. "I don't understand," she managed to say, hating how her voice shook. "Margaret, what is this?" Luca moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. His presence seemed to steal all the air from the room. "My mother has told me all about you, Emma Hart." The way he said her name made it sound like he owned it. 26 years old, event planner, lives alone, no family in the city, and, his lips curved into a cold smile, incredibly naive. "I was just trying to help," Emma protested, her mind racing. "She called me, said she needed—" "Help?" Luca finished for her, now close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "Yes, you certainly did help. You helped yourself right into our world." He reached out, catching a strand of her hair between his fingers. The gesture was almost gentle, but his eyes remained merciless. "And now that you're here, there's no going back." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Please," she whispered. "I won't say anything. I'll forget this ever happened. You're coming with me, Emma." Luca cut her off, his tone low and chilling. "Whether you like it or not." Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now, back to the story. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse floor, and Emma's heart pounded against her ribs as Luca's firm grip on her elbow guided her forward. The marble floors gleamed beneath her feet, each step echoing in the vast space. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow reflections across the walls, but their beauty couldn't mask the suffocating weight of wealth built on violence. "Welcome to your new home," Lucas said, his voice devoid of warmth. Two men in dark suits stood at attention near the floor-to-ceiling windows. Their hands rested casually near their waistbands, where Emma was certain guns were holstered. Their eyes followed her every movement, making her skin crawl. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop trembling. "This is kidnapping. You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want." Luca's words cut through the air like ice. He moved to a leather armchair, settling into it with the easy confidence of a predator. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Emma's legs felt weak as she perched on the edge of an expensive sofa. Everything in the room screamed of money, from the abstract paintings that probably cost more than her yearly salary to the Italian leather furniture. But it all felt cold, clinical, like a museum where she didn't belong. "I want to go home," Emma said, hating how small her voice sounded. A harsh laugh escaped Luca's lips. "That's not possible anymore." One of the men by the window shifted, and Emma noticed how his gaze never wavered from her. She was being watched, assessed, marked as a potential threat or liability. Her mind raced through escape scenarios, the elevator, the emergency stairs, even the windows. But each option seemed more impossible than the last. "You don't understand," Emma tried again, forcing strength into her voice. "I have a life, a job." "Had," Luca corrected. He leaned forward, his dark eyes boring into hers. "When you helped my mother, you became entangled in something much bigger than yourself." Emma's throat tightened. "I just helped an old woman who seemed sick, that's all." "No." Luca stood, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. "You helped Margaret Moretti, and now her debt becomes yours." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. "What debt? I don't understand." "My mother's actions have consequences. She's been playing a dangerous game, and now you're her insurance policy." Luca's voice grew colder with each word. "Margaret's debt is now yours. You're involved, and there's no escaping it. Your life as you knew it is over." Emma felt the room spin as the full weight of his words sank in. She wasn't just trapped in a fancy penthouse. She was trapped in a web of mafia politics and deadly stakes, all because she'd tried to help someone in need. The realization settled in her stomach like lead. She was in far too deep, and there was no way out. The silk curtains billowed in the moonlight as Emma stuffed clothes into her small backpack. Her hands trembled, but she forced them steady. The guest room Luca had given her was bigger than her entire apartment, with its crystal chandelier and imported marble floors. All this luxury felt like a gilded cage. She glanced at her phone. 2:37 a.m. The guards changed shifts at 2:30. She'd watched their patterns, waiting for this moment. Her heart thundered against her ribs as she zipped the bag closed. The cool metal of the doorknob pressed against her palm. One turn, and she'd be free. She'd run until this nightmare was nothing but a distant memory. Emma took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. The door swung open before she could turn the handle. Luca filled the doorframe, his broad shoulders blocking any escape route. His dark suit was perfectly pressed even at this hour, as if he'd been waiting for this very moment. A knowing smirk played at the corners of his mouth. "Going somewhere, Kata?" His voice was velvet-wrapped steel. Emma stumbled backward, clutching her bag to her chest like a shield. I was just..." "Just what?" He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in her ears. "Planning to run?" His eyes fell to the backpack, and his smirk widened. "How predictable." You can't keep me here. Emma tried to inject strength into her voice, but it wavered. I'm not part of your world. Luca moved closer, each step measured and predatory. You became part of my world the moment you helped my mother. He reached out, running a finger along her jaw. Emma jerked away from his touch. Such fire. But you need to understand something, Emma. She backed away until her legs hit the edge of the bed. Luca followed, invading her space until she could smell his expensive cologne. Her chest tightened with fear and something else she didn't want to name. I've had my men watching your family, he continued, his voice dropping lower. Your sister Sarah, starting her first year of college. Your parents in their little house in Queens. His dark eyes bore into hers. Such a happy family. It would be a shame if something happened to them. Horror washed over Emma like ice water. You wouldn't. I would. He caught her chin between his thumb and forefinger, forcing her to meet his gaze. I protect what's mine, Emma, and I destroy anything that threatens what belongs to me. She jerked her face from his grip. I don't belong to you. No? His laugh was cold and sharp. Try to run, and I'll make sure your family suffers. You belong to me now. Emma froze, her bag slipping from numb fingers to thud against the floor. The threat hung in the air between them, heavy and real. Her chest constricted as the full weight of her situation crashed over her. There was no escape, not when her family's safety hung in the balance. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure Luca could hear it in the silence of the room. She had no choice. She had to stay. Emma's heels clicked against the marble floor as she paced back and forth in her luxurious prison. The room was bigger than her entire apartment, with cream-colored walls and gold accents that probably cost more than she made in a year. But all that luxury couldn't mask what this place really was. A cage. Her stomach churned as she glanced at the untouched breakfast tray by the door. The suited man who delivered it hadn't said a word, just like all the others. They moved like shadows through the penthouse, their eyes always watching, always judging. A door slammed somewhere in the distance, making her jump. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her breathing. Every sound, every footstep in the hallway sent her heart racing. Was it Luca coming back? One of his men? Or worse. The morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a stunning view of the New York skyline. But the windows were sealed shut. She'd already checked 3 times. The door was heavy, solid wood, and she knew without trying that it would be locked. Emma sank into a plush armchair, her legs weak from hours of pacing. Her phone had been taken, her laptop too. No way to contact anyone, to let them know she was okay. Would anyone even be looking for her? The thought of her family worrying made her chest tight. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes with agonizing slowness. Lunch came and went, delivered by another silent guard. The food smelled amazing, some kind of pasta with garlic bread, but she couldn't bring herself to eat. Her appetite had vanished the moment Luca had threatened her family. She got up again, unable to stay still. The room was beautiful, with its king-sized bed draped in silk sheets and artwork that probably belonged in a museum. But all she could see were the bars of her cage, gilded though they might be. A sound in the hallway made her freeze. These footsteps were different, heavier, more purposeful. Her heart hammered against her ribs as they grew closer. She knew those steps now, had memorized their rhythm in the short time she'd been here. The door opened without warning, and Luca filled the frame. He'd loosened his tie, and his jacket was gone, leaving him in a crisp white shirt that did nothing to hide his powerful build. His dark eyes found her immediately, and something in them made her breath catch. "You haven't eaten," he said, gesturing to the untouched meals. Emma lifted her chin, refusing to show fear. "I'm not hungry." "Starving yourself won't change anything." His voice was softer than before, almost gentle. It was more unsettling than his earlier coldness. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Emma backed away instinctively, but there was nowhere to go. Her legs hit the edge of the bed, and she had to stop. Luca moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. He smelled like expensive cologne, and something darker, more dangerous. When he reached for her face, she flinched, but his touch was surprisingly tender as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I didn't want it to be this way," he said quietly, his eyes searching hers. "But there's no turning back now." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, she glimpsed something human beneath the monster, something that made her heart skip for entirely different reasons. But she wouldn't let him see how it affected her. She couldn't afford to show any weakness, not here, not with him. Emma kept her face carefully blank, even as her pulse raced beneath her skin. She wouldn't let him win. Wouldn't let him see how his gentle touch and soft words confused her. She was his prisoner, nothing more. She had to remember that. Emma stepped into the dim private dining room alongside Luca, the air crackling with tension and the scent of fine cigars. A long, polished table stretched before them, surrounded by men whose faces wore the hard lines of experience. She felt like an intruder, witnessing secrets meant for shadows. Luca, with an aura that commanded obedience, moved to the head of the table, his presence casting a formidable shadow that seemed to pull every gaze toward him. The men shifted in their seats, respect mingling with unease. As Luca spoke, his words were precise and edged, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Gentlemen, let us begin," he intoned, the steely confidence in his voice unmistakable. Emma's eyes remained fixed on him, the mask of authority he wore both mesmerizing and chilling. He discussed territories and alliances, his gaze sweeping across the room, assessing each man with calculated intensity. Emma caught snippets of negotiations, talk of assets and control that seemed to tie together a world she could hardly grasp. Luca's demeanor was cold, unyielding. The pulse of power seemed to ripple across the table, demanding attention and compliance. The meeting concluded, and Luca's nod signaled the end of the proceedings. Emma followed him out, her heart a tight fist of apprehension. She barely registered the details of their exit until the world outside exploded into chaos. A gang sprang from the shadows, weapons drawn, eyes keen with malice. Everything slowed to air. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's penthouse, but Emma couldn't appreciate their beauty. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The events from earlier played on repeat in her mind. The gunshots, the screams, the blood on the pavement. She perched on the edge of the tail leather couch, as far from Luca as possible. He moved with quiet grace to the bar cart, crystal decanter catching the dim light. "You need this more than I do." His voice was different now, lower, less commanding. Emma watched him pour amber liquid into 2 glasses. The clink of ice against crystal made her jump. Her nerves were shot. "I won't hurt you," Luca said, extending 1 glass toward her. When she hesitated, he added, "It's just whiskey, to calm your nerves." She accepted the glass with trembling fingers, careful not to touch his hand. The first sip burned her throat, but the warmth that followed helped steady her slightly. Luca settled beside her, leaving enough space that she didn't feel crowded. His usual rigid posture had softened. He looked almost human. "The first time is always the hardest," he said, studying his own glass. "Seeing violence up close. It changes you." Emma took another sip, larger this time. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No." His jaw tightened. "Nothing about this life is supposed to make you feel better." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of the city below. Emma noticed things she hadn't before, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight, the slight tremor in his hand as he raised his glass, the darkness that haunted his eyes. "I was 12, he said suddenly. "The first time my father put a gun in my hand." Emma's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. "He would wake me before dawn every morning. Training, combat, weapons." Luca's voice grew distant. "Failure wasn't an option. Neither was weakness." The whiskey in Emma's glass rippled with her trembling. She could picture it. A young boy forced into violence, molded into the man beside her. "The first person I killed, I was 14. His words came out hollow. "My father arranged it, said it was necessary, called it my initiation." Horror crawled up Emma's spine. She wanted to cover her ears, to run from this confession, but something kept her rooted in place. After that, it got easier. Had to get easier. Luca's knuckles went white around his glass. "Every time I hesitated, every moment of doubt, my father made sure I paid for it." Emma found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. That's monstrous." "That's the family business." His laugh was bitter, empty. "You don't get choices in this world, Emma. You either become the monster they want, or you die." She watched as he drained his glass, the movement sharp and practiced. His confession hung heavy in the air between them. This wasn't the cold, calculating man who had threatened her family. This was someone else, someone buried beneath years of violence and control. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Luca turned to face her fully. In the dim light, shadows played across his features, softening the hard edges she'd come to fear. "Because you need to understand. This world, my world, it's not a choice. It's survival." Their eyes met, and Emma saw something crack in his carefully constructed facade. Pain, raw and ancient, flickered across his face. The monster who had terrorized her these past days suddenly looked achingly human. But even as her heart twisted with unwanted sympathy, Emma reminded herself of who he was, what he was. One moment of vulnerability didn't erase the blood on his hands or the threats he'd made. She couldn't trust him, not yet. Maybe not ever. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped her small bag, creeping down the dimly lit hallway of Luca's penthouse. The marble floors felt cold beneath her bare feet as she moved silently toward the elevator. Her heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder of what she was risking. 3 steps. 2 steps. 1. "Going somewhere?" Luca's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Emma froze, her muscles tensing as she heard his measured footsteps approaching from behind. The bag slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft thud on the floor. "Turn around." His command was soft, but carried an edge that made her shiver. Emma slowly faced him, pressing her back against the wall.
Luca stood before her, dressed in black silk pajama pants, and nothing else. His bare chest was marked with scars, testament to the violent world he inhabited. His dark eyes studied her with predatory focus.
I told you what would happen if you tried to run.
He took a step closer, placing one hand against the wall beside her head.
Did you think I wouldn't notice? That my men wouldn't alert me the moment you left your room?
I can't stay here, Emma whispered, hating how her voice trembled. This isn't my world. I'm not meant for this. Luca's laugh was cold, devoid of humor.
Your world? The moment you helped my mother, you stepped into mine. There's no going back.
He moved closer, his body heat radiating against her. Emma pressed herself further against the wall, but there was nowhere to go. The scent of his cologne, expensive and intoxicating, filled her senses. Please, she tried again, forcing strength into her voice. I won't say anything about what I've seen. I'll disappear. Enough! His fist slammed into the wall beside her head, making her jump. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet.
You don't understand, do you? There is no disappearing. My enemies would find you. They would torture you for information about me, about my family, and then they would kill you.
Tears burned in Emma's eyes. So I'm just supposed to accept being your prisoner? Luca's expression shifted, something flickering in his dark gaze. His free hand came up to brush a tear from her cheek, the gentle touch at odds with his brutal words.
You're not my prisoner, Emma. You're under my protection.
What's the difference? She challenged, even as her body betrayed her by leaning into his touch. He moved closer, pressing his body against hers. The heat of him seeped through her thin nightgown, making her breath catch.
His fingers trailed down her neck, leaving fire in their wake. The difference, he murmured, his lips brushing her ear, is that I can make this easier for you, Emma. But you have to stop running. Emma's heart raced, torn between the urge to fight and the impossible pull she felt toward him. She was trapped in his world, and they both knew it. The real question was, would she keep fighting, or would she surrender to the darkness he offered? Emma stood at the window of Luca's penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle below. 2 weeks had passed since she'd become his prisoner, though the luxurious surroundings made that word feel strange. Her fingers traced the cool glass, her reflection pale against the darkness outside. The view is better from the balcony. Luca's deep voice came from behind her. Emma's body tensed, electricity shooting through her at the sound. She didn't turn around, but she could feel his presence moving closer. I'm fine here, she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. The warmth of his body radiated against her back as he stepped closer. Still afraid I'll push you over the edge? There was dark amusement in his tone. His breath tickled her neck, making her shiver. The thought had crossed my mind. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, trying to create some distance between them without actually moving. Luca's hand came to rest on her shoulder, his touch burning through the thin fabric of her blouse. If I wanted you dead, Emma, you wouldn't have made it past day 1. She finally turned to face him, finding herself trapped between his body and the window. His dark eyes held that familiar intensity that both terrified and thrilled her. Is that supposed to make me feel better? His lips curved into a predatory smile. It's supposed to make you understand that you're here for a reason. Every day was like this, a dance of proximity and withdrawal. Luca seemed to appear whenever she least expected him, invading her space with his commanding presence. The worst part wasn't the fear anymore. It was the way her body responded to him. Get dressed,
he ordered suddenly, stepping back. We're going out. Emma's eyes widened. Out? Where? Family dinner. His expression hardened. My father wants to meet you. Panic seized her chest. Your father? The head of the… Yes, Luca cut her off. That father. Wear the black dress in your closet. You have 30 minutes. The dress hung in her closet like a sentence, sleek, expensive, and clearly chosen with purpose. Emma's hands trembled as she slipped it on, the silk material clinging to her curves in a way that made her feel exposed. When she emerged from her room, Luca was waiting. His eyes darkened as they traveled over her body, making her feel both powerful and vulnerable. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his dangerous appeal. You clean up well, he said, his voice rough. The drive to the restaurant was tense. Emma's fingers twisted in her lap as the city passed by outside the tinted windows. Luca's hand suddenly covered hers, stilling their nervous movement. Stop fidgeting, he commanded softly. You're under my protection. That means something in my world. The restaurant was clearly exclusive, with private security and valets who bowed their heads respectfully as Luca approached. His hand pressed against her lower back, guiding her inside. The touch sent sparks through her body. The private dining room was filled with well-dressed people who radiated power and danger. Conversations hushed as they entered, all eyes turning to assess her. Emma felt like prey being sized up by predators. Remember, Luca whispered in her ear, his arm wrapping possessively around her waist. You're with me. Keep your head high. At the head of the table sat an older man with steel-gray hair and eyes that could freeze blood. Antonio Moretti, Luca's father and the head of the family. His calculating gaze fixed on Emma, studying her like she was a puzzle to solve. Luca's grip tightened on her waist as they approached the table. The message was clear to everyone present. She belonged to him. Whether that was protection or possession, Emma wasn't sure. But as the cold eyes of the Moretti family assessed her from all sides, she found herself leaning into his touch, seeking the security of his dangerous embrace. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across the mahogany dining table, where Luca sat at the head, his presence commanding attention from everyone in the room. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair, trying to make herself as small as possible while the Moretti family discussed their business. The words they used were careful, calculated, but she wasn't fooled. Behind the polite terminology lay violence and danger. The situation in the South needs handling, an older man with silver-streaked hair said, his accent thick with Italian roots. Our competitors are getting bold. Emma's fingers tightened around her water glass as she caught Luca's expression darkening. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath the surface. She'd seen that look before, right before he'd taken down those men who'd attacked them. They'll learn their place, Luca replied, his voice carrying the weight of a promise that made Emma's skin crawl. I've already set things in motion. The conversation continued around her, a dance of subtle threats and veiled implications. Emma tried to focus on the elaborate place settings, the expensive wallpaper, anything but the cruel reality of what was being discussed. But her ears caught every word, each one adding to the growing knot in her stomach. A younger cousin, Marco, she thought his name was, leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. What about the shipment coming in next week? The timing could be perfect for sending a message. Enough. Luca's single word cut through the air like a blade. His eyes flickered to Emma. For a fraction of a second, and she saw something there. Was it concern? Protection?
but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The family continued their meal, the clink of silverware against fine china a stark contrast to the weight of their words. Emma pushed her food around her plate, her appetite long gone. She could feel eyes on her, some curious, others calculating. They were assessing her, she realized, trying to determine if she was a liability or an asset. An elderly aunt at the far end of the table spoke up, her voice carrying a sweetness that felt out of place. "And what about you, dear? Emma, isn't it? How are you finding your stay with our Luca?" All eyes turned to her, and Emma felt her throat go dry. She could feel Luca's intense gaze boring into her, waiting for her response. Everything is fine," she managed, hating how weak her voice sounded. "Just fine?" Another family member chimed in, his tone carrying an edge of mockery. "Our hospitality not up to your standards?" "That's not what Emma started, but Luca cut her off. "She's adjusting," he said firmly, his tone brooking no argument. "And she's under my protection. Is that clear?" The table fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Emma caught a few meaningful glances exchanged between family members, and her cheeks burned. She wasn't just trapped in Luca's world anymore. She was being woven into the very fabric of it. As the dinner progressed, more family members arrived, each bringing their own agenda to the table. Emma watched as deals were made with handshakes and nods, as territories were divided with nothing more than a few careful words. It was like watching a chess game where every piece was deadly. She jumped when Luca's hand suddenly appeared on her shoulder, his touch both gentle and possessive. He leaned down, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "Come with me." Emma followed him out of the dining room, her legs shaky. He led her to a quiet corner of the house, away from prying eyes and ears. The shadows played across his features, making him look more dangerous than ever. Luca's eyes held hers, dark and intense. "You'll have to play your part in this, Emma. There's no going back now." Her heart sank, the weight of his words crushing any remaining hope she had of escaping this world. Her fate was tied to his family, and there was no way out. The mansion's marble floors echoed beneath Emma's bare feet as she paced the hallway outside Luca's office. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its deep chimes matching her thundering heartbeat. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the raised voices drew her attention like a moth to flame. "She's a liability, Luca." The elder Moretti's voice cut through the heavy wooden door. "The girl knows too much." Emma pressed herself against the wall, her silk nightgown catching on the textured wallpaper. She held her breath, straining to hear more. "I have it under control." Luca's voice was ice-cold, devoid of the warmth she'd glimpsed in rare moments alone with him. "Do you? Because from where I stand, you're letting her cloud your judgment. The business comes first. Always." "I know my priorities, Father." "Then prove it. Use her for what we need, then cut her loose, one way or another." Emma's blood ran cold. The implications were clear. She was nothing more than a chess piece to them. Her hands trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold back the wave of panic threatening to overwhelm her. "The girl stays." Luca's tone left no room for argument. "She's mine to deal with." "You're getting soft, son. This isn't like you." "I said I'll handle it." Heavy footsteps approached the door. Emma scrambled back, ducking around the corner just as it swung open. She pressed herself into an alcove, watching through the shadows as Luca's father stormed past, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the marble. Her mind raced with everything she'd heard. The casual way they'd discussed her fate made her stomach churn. She'd known she was trapped, but hearing them talk about her like she was disposable, it sparked something inside her. Anger replaced fear, burning away her hesitation. She waited until the elder Moretti's footsteps faded before stepping into Luca's office doorway. He stood at the window, his broad shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit jacket, a glass of whiskey dangling from his fingers. "So that's all I am to you?" Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "A pawn in your game?" Luca turned slowly, his dark eyes finding her in the dim light. "You shouldn't be here." "Where should I be? Locked in my room like a good little prisoner?" Emma stepped forward, her anger giving her courage. "I heard everything. You and your father, discussing my fate like I'm nothing. Just another business transaction." His jaw clenched. In 2 long strides, he closed the distance between them. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Then explain it to me." She lifted her chin, refusing to back down despite his looming presence. "I deserve to know what you're planning for me." Anger flashed in his eyes. He slammed his glass down on the desk, making her jump. The whiskey sloshed over the rim, staining the polished wood. "You want answers? Fine. You're here because you got yourself involved in something bigger than you can imagine. Because my mother's games put you in danger. Because every rival family now knows your face and would use you against me in a heartbeat." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Use me against you? Why would they?" "Because they see what I try to hide." His voice rose, filling the room. Then, just as quickly, the anger seemed to drain from him. His expression softened, though his eyes remained intense. "You want the truth? You're trapped here, but I'll protect you. No one touches you while I'm around." The heavy curtains in Emma's room cast long shadows across the floor as night crept in. She sat on the edge of her bed, still processing the events of the day, the hushed conversations, the tension that filled every corner of the penthouse. A soft knock broke through her thoughts. Luca stood in the doorway, his usual commanding presence diminished. His tie hung loose around his neck, and his white shirt was wrinkled, so unlike his normally impeccable appearance. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, held a haunted look that made Emma's breath catch. "Can I come in?" His voice was rough, lacking its usual authority. Emma nodded, her throat tight. She watched as he crossed the room, his movements lacking their usual predatory grace. He sat beside her, keeping a careful distance, and ran a hand through his dark hair. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Emma could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else, whiskey, maybe. His hands, usually steady and sure, trembled slightly as he loosened his tie further. "I had to kill someone today," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "A man who's been like an uncle to me since I was a child. He betrayed the family." Emma's heart pounded against her ribs. She'd seen Luca's violence before, but this was different. This wasn't the cold, calculating killer she'd come to know. This was a man carrying the weight of impossible choices. "My father," Luca's jaw clenched. "He gave the order, said I had to prove my loyalty." He laughed, but it was a hollow sound that made Emma shiver. As if everything I've done wasn't enough. Emma found herself reaching for him before she could stop herself. Her fingers brushed his sleeve, and he flinched as if her touch burned. But he didn't pull away. "I was 12 when my mother died," he continued, staring at some point in the distance. "Cancer. She was the only one who ever showed me real kindness in this life. After she was gone," he swallowed hard. "My father became obsessed with making me stronger. No weakness allowed. Every time I showed emotion, every time I hesitated. His words trailed off, but Emma could fill in the blanks. She'd seen the scars on his back when he changed shirts one day, long white lines that spoke of old wounds and harsh lessons. "Do you know what it's like?" he asked, finally turning to look at her. "To be trained to kill your own heart? To shut off everything that makes you human?" Emma shook her head, unable to look away from the raw pain in his eyes. This was Luca stripped bare. No masks, no walls, just a man drowning in the weight of his legacy. "My father says love is weakness," he continued. "That attachment gets you killed in our world. But my mother," his voice cracked, "she used to tell me that love was the only thing worth living for." The moonlight streaming through the window cast half his face in shadow, making him look younger, more vulnerable. Emma's heart ached for the boy he must have been, forced to become this man who carried so much darkness. "Sometimes I look at myself in the mirror," he whispered, "and I don't recognize who I've become. Everything feels like a performance. Every decision, every threat, every act of violence, it's all part of the role I have to play." He turned to her then, his eyes filled with an intensity that made her breath catch. His hand found hers, his touch gentler than she'd ever felt from him. "But you, Emma," he squeezed her fingers, "you're the only thing in my life that feels real. When I'm with you, I remember what it's like to feel something other than anger or duty. You make me want to be more than what they made me." Emma stared at him, her heart thundering in her chest. This confession, this glimpse into his soul, changed everything. The monster she'd feared was just a man, broken and scarred, reaching out for something real in a world built on lies and violence. Despite herself, despite everything he'd done, she felt her heart beginning to soften toward him. The sound of shattering glass jolted Emma from her sleep. Gunfire erupted outside the penthouse, and her heart leaped into her throat. She scrambled out of bed, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. More shots rang out, closer this time. Shouts and heavy footsteps echoed through the halls. Emma's hands trembled as she pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself as small as possible. "Find her!" a rough voice commanded from somewhere in the penthouse. "The beast's little pet can't hide forever." Emma's breath caught in her chest. She darted to the walk-in closet, squeezing herself between hanging designer clothes Luca had bought her. The irony wasn't lost on her, hiding among the expensive gifts from the man who'd made her a target. The bedroom door burst open. Heavy boots crossed the floor, and Emma covered her mouth to muffle her breathing. The closet door creaked open, and she pressed herself deeper into the clothes. "Check everywhere," someone growled. "Boss wants her alive." Emma's heart pounded so hard she was sure they could hear it. A man pushed aside hangers just inches from where she stood. She could smell cigarette smoke on his clothes. Gunfire erupted again, this time from inside the penthouse. The men in her room cursed and rushed out. The sounds of fighting grew closer, brutal, violent sounds that made her stomach turn. She heard Luca's voice, cold and deadly. "Where is she?" A gurgling sound, a thud, then silence. "Find her!" Luca roared, his voice carrying an edge of desperation she'd never heard before. Emma wanted to call out to him, but fear kept her silent. What if it was a trick? What if the rival faction was still there? More gunshots, the sound of breaking furniture. Fighting. Then heavy footsteps approached the bedroom again. "Emma?" Luca's voice was rough, urgent.
She still didn't move, paralyzed with fear. The closet door opened slowly. Luca stood there, his white shirt splattered with blood, his eyes wild with a mix of fury and
relief when he saw her. Without a word, he reached in and pulled her out, his hands rough but gentle as they checked her for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" he demanded, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Emma shook her head, unable to speak. Her legs gave out, but Luca caught her, pulling her against his chest. She could feel his heart racing as fast as hers. "I should have been here," he growled. "They never should have gotten this close to you." Emma looked up at him, seeing the raw emotion in his usually cold eyes. Blood streaked his face, his knuckles were split and bleeding, but all she could focus on was the way he held her, like she was something precious he couldn't bear to lose. "You're mine, Emma," he said, his voice rough with possession and promise. "I'll burn the world down to keep you safe." Emma paced across the marble floor of Luca's penthouse living room, her fingers twisting together nervously. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but their beauty was lost on her tonight. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she finally gathered the courage to speak. "I can't live like this anymore, Luca. Being watched every second, never knowing if today is the day someone tries to kill you, or me." Her voice cracked. "I'm not built for this world." Luca stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit. He turned slowly, his dark eyes hardening. "You think you have a choice?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "The moment you helped my mother, you became part of this." "I didn't ask for any of this," Emma's voice rose. "I was just trying to help an old woman who seemed sick. How was I supposed to know she was part of the mob?" "Lower your voice," Luca warned, taking a step toward her. "You don't get to raise your voice at me." Emma backed away, bumping into the leather sofa. "Or what? You'll threaten my family again? Lock me in my room? That's all you know how to do, control and threaten." Something flashed in Luca's eyes. Pain, maybe, or anger. It disappeared so quickly, Emma wasn't sure she'd seen it at all. "Everything I do is to protect you." "Protect me?" Emma laughed bitterly. "You're the reason I need protection in the first place." The sound of a door opening interrupted their argument. One of Luca's men burst in, his face pale. "Boss, we've got a problem. There's been a leak." Luca's expression shifted instantly from emotional to coldly professional. "What kind of leak?" "Information about tonight's shipment. Someone inside the family." The man's eyes darted to Emma, then back to Luca. "We found evidence. You need to see this." Luca nodded sharply. "Show me." The man pulled out a phone, displaying something Emma couldn't see. As Luca looked at the screen, his jaw clenched and a muscle ticked in his cheek. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "Where did you get this?" Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "It was intercepted from Margaret's phone." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Margaret, the woman who had seemed so frail, so helpless, the woman whose plea for help had dragged Emma into this nightmare. Luca turned to Emma, his eyes blazing. "Did you know about this?" "Know about what?" Emma's voice trembled. "I haven't seen Margaret since that first day." He studied her face intently, searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he turned back to his man. "Get everyone in position. Now!" The man hurried out, leaving Emma alone with Luca. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations. "Your mother," Emma started, then stopped, unsure how to continue. has been feeding information to our enemies. Luca's voice was flat. The woman you felt so compelled to help that day? She's been working against us this entire time. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. She sank onto the sofa, her legs unable to hold her. All this time, she'd blamed Luca for trapping her in this world. But it had been Margaret who had orchestrated it from the beginning. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would she do this?" Luca's laugh was bitter. Power. Money. Revenge. Take your pick. He moved to the bar and poured himself a drink, downing it in one swift motion. The question is, what else has she been planning? And why did she need you? Emma felt sick. She'd been nothing but a pawn in Margaret's game, and now she was trapped deeper than ever. The walls of her gilded cage seemed to close in around her. Who could she trust? Luca, with his violence and control? Margaret, who had manipulated her from the start? Or was there anyone in this dark world worthy of trust at all? The penthouse felt smaller than ever as Luca stalked toward Emma, his jaw clenched and his eyes blazing. The setting sun cast long shadows across his face, making him look more dangerous than she'd ever seen him. But his hands remained at his sides, controlled despite the fury radiating from every inch of him. "Tell me everything," he demanded, his voice low and steady. "Every word Margaret said to you." Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the back of a leather chair. She came to me this morning, said she needed to warn me about something." The words felt like glass in her throat. "She told me your family was planning something terrible." Luca's laugh was harsh and bitter. "And you believed her? The woman who manipulated you into this life in the first place?" "I didn't know what to believe," Emma's voice cracked. "I still don't. Everyone in your world speaks in half-truths and lies, including you." He moved closer, and Emma could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Gunpowder, maybe. His presence filled the room, making it hard to breathe. "I have never lied to you, Emma. Never. I've hidden things, yes, but I've never lied." "Then tell me the truth now." She lifted her chin, refusing to back down. "What does Margaret want? Why did she really bring me into your life?" Luca ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "Margaret was once my father's most trusted advisor, but she's been working with our rivals, feeding them information. Using you." His eyes met hers, intense and angry. "Using you was her way of distracting me, making me vulnerable." The truth hit Emma like a physical blow. She'd been nothing but a pawn in their game. Her legs weakened, and she gripped the chair tighter. "So none of it was real? Helping her that day? It was all planned?" "Every second." Luca's voice softened slightly. "She knew you would help her. Your kindness. She used it against you. Against us both." Emma felt sick. The memory of that day, canceling her dream job interview, rushing to help an elderly woman who seemed so desperate. It all felt tainted now. "What happens now?" Luca checked his phone, his expression darkening. "Now we move. It's not safe here." He crossed the room to a hidden safe, pulling out a gun and tucking it into his jacket. "We need to figure out exactly what Margaret has told our enemies." "Where are we going?" Emma asked, her heart racing as Luca took her arm, his touch firm but not painful. "Somewhere quiet, where we can talk." He led her toward the elevator, his body tense and alert. "I need to understand everything Margaret said to you. Every detail matters now."
The ride down to the garage was silent, heavy with unspoken words. Luca's black SUV waited in its usual spot, one of his men holding the door open. Emma slid into the passenger seat, watching as Luca barked orders to his security team. As they pulled out onto the street, the city lights began to blur together. Emma stared out the window, trying to make sense of everything. The betrayal felt like a weight in her chest, crushing her from the inside out. "I should have seen it coming," Luca said suddenly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Margaret was too eager to bring you into our world, too insistent that I keep you close." "Did you?" Emma turned to look at him. "Keep me close because she insisted?" His jaw tightened. "At first, but then—" He fell silent, focusing on the road as they left the city behind. The buildings grew smaller, replaced by darker streets and empty lots. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, feeling cold despite the warm evening. Everything she thought she knew was unraveling. Margaret's betrayal, Luca's confessions, the growing danger she could feel pressing in from all sides. It was too much. Her world was spinning out of control, and she had no idea how to stop it. The moonlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luca's penthouse, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Emma paced in her room, her mind racing with the revelation of Margaret's betrayal. Her hands trembled as she recalled the documents she'd discovered earlier that day, papers that proved the elderly woman had been orchestrating events from the beginning, manipulating both Emma and Luca for her own gain.
The weight of the truth pressed down on our chest. Every kindness, every seemingly innocent request from Margaret had been calculated. Even that first day, when Emma had given up her dream job to help her, had been part of an elaborate scheme. The realization made her stomach turn. Emma caught her reflection in the mirror. Gone was the naive event planner who'd walked into Margaret's apartment weeks ago. In her place stood someone harder, someone who'd witnessed the brutality of Luca's world and survived. The dark circles under her eyes told stories of sleepless nights, of gunshots and blood on pavement, of a world she never asked to be part of, but now couldn't escape. She grabbed her phone, scrolling through old messages from Margaret. Each one now read like a carefully crafted lie. How many times had the older woman played on her sympathy? How many times had she used Emma's kindness against her? The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. Heavy, deliberate steps. Luca. Her heart rate quickened, but not entirely from fear anymore. Something else stirred in her chest when he was near, something she wasn't ready to name. The door opened without a knock. Luca stood there, his imposing frame filling the doorway. His suit was immaculate, as always, but his eyes were stormy with barely contained rage. "We need to talk about Margaret," he said, his voice low and controlled. Emma lifted her chin, squaring her shoulders. "Yes, we do." She moved toward him, refusing to be intimidated by his presence. "I'm done being a pawn in this game, Luca. I won't let her, or you, use me anymore." Luca's jaw tightened. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click that somehow seemed more threatening than a slam. "You think you have a choice?" His words were soft, dangerous. "I'm making a choice," Emma said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I won't be the weak link in your operation anymore. I won't be the thing Margaret can use against you." She took another step closer, close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne. "I want to know everything. About the business, about Margaret's involvement, about what she's really after." A muscle twitched in Luca's cheek.
He reached out, his fingers grazing her jaw in a touch that was both tender and possessive.
You don't know what you're asking for, Emma. This world, my world, it changes people. It breaks them.
I'm already broken, she whispered, not flinching from his touch. The moment I walked into Margaret's apartment, my old life was over. But I'm done being afraid. I'm done being manipulated. Luca's eyes darkened, his hand sliding to the back of her neck.
And what makes you think you can trust me more than her?
Because you've never lied about what you are, Emma said. You're a monster, Luca, but you're an honest one. His grip tightened slightly, not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her of his strength.
And what does that make you? The beauty who wants to dance with the beast? Emma stepped back from his touch, her heart pounding but her resolve firm.
No, it makes me someone who's choosing to fight back. I won't be your pawn anymore.
Luca's expression hardened, his eyes turning to ice. He closed the distance between them in one fluid step, his presence overwhelming. You're mine, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Whether you like it or not. The penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, but Emma barely noticed them. Her attention was fixed on Luca, who stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit. The events of the past few hours weighed heavily in the air between them. There's only one way to end this, Luca said, his voice low and controlled. He turned to face her, his dark eyes holding a storm of emotions she'd never seen before. I made a call. Emma's heart stuttered. She knew that tone. It meant something irreversible was about to happen.
What kind of call?
To my father. Luca moved closer, his presence filling her space. The rival faction, Margaret's betrayal. It ends tonight. But there's a price. The word price sent chills down Emma's spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold herself together.
What price?
You. His hand reached out, fingers grazing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. My father will mobilize everything we have, eliminate every threat. But he wants assurance that you're not a liability. Emma stepped back, her legs hitting the leather sofa behind her.
What does that mean?
It means you belong to me, officially. No more resistance, no more escape attempts. Luca's eyes darkened. You become part of the family. Permanently. The weight of his words crashed over her like a wave. Emma sank onto the sofa, her fingers digging into the leather.
You're asking me to give up everything.
I'm asking you to choose life. Luca knelt before her, his hands gripping her knees. The gesture was possessive, desperate. They won't stop hunting us. Margaret's betrayal runs deeper than we thought. The only way I can protect you is if you're mine completely. Tears burned behind Emma's eyes.
And if I refuse?
Then I can't guarantee anyone's safety. Not yours, not your family's. His grip tightened. I won't lose you, Emma, even if you hate me for it. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, mocking the freedom she'd once had. Just weeks ago, she'd been planning her career, dreaming of a normal life. Now, she was trapped in a web of violence and power, with a man who both terrified and captivated her.
What happens to Margaret?
She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Luca's expression hardened. She made her choice. She'll face the consequences.
Emma closed her eyes, remembering the elderly woman who'd seemed so harmless. Had it all been an act? Had she been manipulating Emma from the start? The thought made her sick. "Look at me," Luca demanded.
Softly. When she opened her eyes, his face was inches from hers. "I know you're scared, but I swear, Emma, no one will ever hurt you again. You'll have everything: protection, luxury, power. All you have to do is stay." His words carried the weight of chains, beautiful and terrible. Emma could feel herself being pulled under, drowning in the darkness of his world. But wasn't she already drowning? Hadn't she been since the moment she stepped into Margaret's apartment? "If I agree," she said slowly, each word tasting like surrender. "I want your word that my family stays safe, no matter what happens." "You have it." Luca's response was immediate, his eyes burning with intensity. "They'll be protected as if they were my own blood." Emma stood, needing to move, to breathe. She walked to the windows, pressing her palm against the cold glass. Below, the city continued its normal rhythm, oblivious to the deal being made in this high-rise prison. "Say it," Luca urged, coming up behind her. His reflection in the glass looked almost vulnerable. "Say you'll be mine." Emma watched their reflections, the powerful Mafia heir and the woman who'd stumbled into his world by chance. There was no going back, no escape from this moment. She could feel the last threads of her old life slipping away. "Yes," she whispered, the word falling from her lips like the final note of a funeral dirge. "I'll stay." The sound of gunfire shattered the night. Emma pressed herself against the cold brick wall, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. From her position in the abandoned warehouse, she could see everything, more than she ever wanted to. Luca moved like a predator through the chaos, his movements precise and lethal. His men flanked him, systematic in their violence as they cleared the building floor by floor. The rival faction had been waiting for them, but they weren't prepared for the fury of Luca Moretti. Blood splattered across concrete, screams echoed off metal walls. Emma wanted to close her eyes, to block it all out, but she couldn't look away. This was Luca's true nature, the beast everyone whispered about. His expensive suit was stained dark, his face set in a mask of cold determination as he executed his enemies without mercy. "Check the upper level," he barked at his men, his voice carrying over the gunfire. His eyes constantly scanned the area, always finding their way back to Emma's position. Even in the midst of this bloodbath, he was watching over her. A man emerged from the shadows behind Luca. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "Behind you!" she screamed before she could stop herself. Luca spun, faster than seemed possible. The rival faction member didn't even have time to raise his weapon before Luca's bullet found its mark. The man crumpled to the ground, and Luca's eyes locked with Emma's across the space between them. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding, perhaps. Or maybe it was just the adrenaline making her heart race faster. She had helped him. She had chosen a side. More shots rang out from above. Emma ducked instinctively as bullets pinged off the metal beams around her. Luca's men returned fire, their coordinated assault pushing the rivals back. The air grew thick with gun smoke and the metallic scent of blood. "Emma!" Luca's voice cut through the chaos. He was moving toward her, cutting down anyone who stood in his path. His face was splattered with blood, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and concern. "Stay down!" An explosion rocked the warehouse. The blast knocked Emma off her feet,
sending her sprawling across the concrete floor. Her ears rang, the world spinning around her. Through the smoke and confusion, she saw shapes moving, heard muffled shouting. Strong hands grabbed her, pulling her up. She struggled for a moment until she recognized Luca's touch. He pressed her against his chest, shielding her body with his own as another explosion lit up the night. "I told you to stay in the car," he growled, his breath hot against her ear. Despite his harsh tone, his hold on her was gentle, protective. "I couldn't," Emma started, but her words were cut off by more gunfire. Luca pushed her behind a concrete pillar, his body still covering hers. The warmth of him contrasted sharply with the cold fear in her veins. She could feel his heart beating rapidly against her back, smell the gunpowder and expensive cologne that clung to his skin. Through the gaps in the pillars, Emma watched as Luca's men systematically eliminated the remaining resistance. The rival faction was falling apart, their coordinated defense crumbling under the relentless assault. This wasn't just a fight. It was an execution. Luca's arms tightened around her as the last shots rang out. The warehouse fell eerily silent, save for the echoing footsteps of his men securing the building. Emma could feel him breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling against her back. He turned her in his arms, his dark eyes searching her face for any sign of injury. Blood stained his cheek, but his touch was surprisingly tender as he cupped her face. "This is the world you're in now," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "No more running." Emma trembled in his embrace, torn between terror at the violence she'd witnessed and an inexplicable feeling of safety in his arms. His words weren't a threat. They were a statement of fact. This was her reality now, painted in blood and gunsmoke, with Luca Moretti as her protector and her cage. The morning sun cast long shadows through the penthouse windows as Emma stood frozen, watching Luca pace the length of his office. His shoulders were rigid with tension, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. The air felt thick with unspoken words and dangerous secrets. "They need to know," Emma said softly, her fingers twisting nervously in front of her. "Your family deserves to—" "They don't deserve anything," Luca snapped, turning to face her
with blazing eyes. "The Moretti name means nothing when they've spent years destroying everything we built." A sharp knock interrupted them. Marco, Luca's most trusted lieutenant, burst through the door. "They're here. All of them." Emma's heart thundered in her chest as heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. The Moretti family council had arrived. Uncles, cousins, and the old guard who'd helped build their empire. At their head was Margaret, her usually warm smile replaced by something cold and calculating. "My son," Margaret's voice dripped with honey-coated venom. "Care to explain why you've frozen our accounts? Why our shipments are being seized?" Luca moved to stand between Emma and his approaching family. "You know exactly why, Mother. I found the books, the real ones. 20 years of skimming profits, selling information to our enemies, weakening us from within." The room erupted in shouts and denials. Emma pressed herself against the wall, watching as decades of family loyalty shattered like glass. Margaret's face transformed into something almost demonic. "Everything I did was for this family," Margaret shrieked. "While you played at being king, I kept us alive. Those deals, those compromises, they protected us." "They protected you." Luca's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "You sold us out piece by piece, and now you'll pay for it." Men in black suits materialized in the doorway. Not Moretti soldiers, but federal agents. Margaret's face drained of color as understanding dawned. "You didn't," she whispered. "I did." Luca's voice was ice. "Every transaction, every betrayal. I gave them everything. The Moretti family falls today." Chaos erupted. Emma watched in horror as family members were cuffed and led away. Curses and threats filled the air. Margaret's eyes found Emma's, filled with hatred and accusation. "You," she spat. "You turned him against his own blood." Emma felt Luca's hand close around her wrist, pulling her closer to his side. The touch anchored her as their world imploded around them. "You brought her into this," Luca reminded his mother coldly. "You used her as a pawn, thinking I wouldn't care enough to protect her. That was your mistake." Margaret laughed, a horrible sound devoid of warmth. "And what happens now, my son? You've destroyed everything. The other families will never let this stand. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." "Maybe," Luca agreed, his grip on Emma tightening. "But we'll be free of you." As the last of the family was led away, Emma finally found her voice. "The other families, they'll come after us, won't they?" Luca turned to her, his expression softening just slightly. "Yes, but I've made arrangements. New identities, new lives. We can disappear." Emma stared at him, understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. He'd sacrificed everything. His family, his empire, his very name, to break free of the corruption that had poisoned them at all. And he'd done it, at least in part, for her. The weight of it settled over her like a heavy blanket. This was the price of loving someone like Luca Moretti, the willingness to burn everything to the ground and start anew. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about choosing a different path, even if that path led straight into darkness. Emma looked around the office one last time, at the wreckage of the Moretti dynasty. This had been her prison, then her home, and now it would become just another memory. But as she met Luca's gaze, she knew with absolute certainty that she wouldn't walk away. Whatever came next, whatever price they had to pay, they would face it together. The penthouse felt different now. Emma traced her fingers along the marble countertop, remembering how just weeks ago this place had been her prison. Now it felt like the only safe haven she had left. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right anymore. Luca stood at the window, his broad shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit. He hadn't spoken since returning from the latest meeting with what remained of his family. The silence between them stretched thin and brittle, like ice about to crack. "Are you going to tell me what happened?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't turn around. "My father wants blood. Mine, specifically." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She gripped the counter harder, her knuckles turning white. "Because of what you did?" "Because of what I didn't do." Luca's voice was cold, detached. "He wanted Margaret dead the moment we discovered her betrayal. I refused." Emma's chest tightened. Despite everything Margaret had done, despite the web of lies she'd woven that had nearly destroyed them all, Luca had spared her. For Emma. "Your father won't forgive that kind of disobedience," she said softly. Luca finally turned to face her.
His dark eyes held a storm of emotions she'd never seen before. Anger, fear, resignation. No, he won't. Emma took a step toward him, but he held up a hand, stopping her. The gesture hurt more than any physical pain could have. "Don't," he said. "Don't what? Don't try to help? Don't care?" Her voice cracked. "It's too late for that, Luca. You made me part of this world. You don't get to shut me out now." "I made you part of this world?" His laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "You walked into it willingly when you helped my mother that day. Everything that followed was just consequence." The cruel words landed like slaps, but Emma refused to flinch. "Is that what you tell yourself? That none of this is your fault? That you didn't choose to keep me here? To make me yours?" Luca moved then, crossing the room in quick strides until he was standing right in front of her. His presence was overwhelming, dangerous in a way it hadn't been since those first days. "I did."
"Make you mine," he growled. "And look what it's cost you. Look what it's cost us both." Emma reached up, pressing her palm against his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath the expensive fabric. "I knew the price," she whispered. "I chose to pay it." "Did you?" His hand covered hers, but instead of the comfort she sought, he pulled it away. "Did you really understand what it meant to be with someone like me? To love a monster?" "You're not." "I am." His voice was final, brooking no argument. "I've killed people, Emma. I've ordered deaths. I've destroyed lives. And now, because I couldn't bear to hurt you by killing Margaret, I brought war to our doorstep." Tears burned in Emma's eyes, but she blinked them back. "So what now? You push me away? Pretend none of this meant anything?" Luca's mask slipped for just a moment, showing the raw pain beneath. "It meant everything," he said softly. "You mean everything. That's why I have to end this." The weight of his words settled over them like a shroud. Emma felt her world tilting, everything she'd come to believe in threatening to shatter. "Luca, please." "My father will come for me." He cut her off. "When he does, I don't want you anywhere near the crossfire. I won't have your blood on my hands too." "I'm already part of this," Emma insisted, reaching for him again. This time he stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. "You were never meant to be part of this world," he said, his voice hollow. "I was selfish keeping you here, loving you. But I won't be selfish anymore." The morning light caught his profile as he turned away, highlighting the sharp angles of his face, the darkness in his eyes. He looked like the man she'd first met, cold, unreachable, dangerous. But now she knew the heart that beat beneath that exterior, and watching him rebuild his walls was like watching her own heart break in slow motion. Luca moved toward the door, each step widening the gulf between them. Emma stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, as everything they'd built together began to crumble. Emma stood in the vast living room of Luca's penthouse, her heart hammering against her ribs as she heard the elevator doors slide open. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. She knew it was him before she saw him. The energy in the air changed, becoming charged with an intensity that only Luca could bring. He emerged from the darkness like a storm rolling in. His suit was immaculate as always, but his eyes, those eyes that had once looked at her with tenderness, now blazed with uncontrolled fury. Blood stained his white shirt cuffs, a testament to whatever violence he had unleashed. "Luca," she whispered, taking an involuntary step backward. He stalked toward her, his movements predatory. The distance between them closed in seconds. "Don't," he growled, his voice raw. "Don't back away from me. Not now." Emma forced herself to stand her ground, lifting her chin. "What happened?" "What happened?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was hollow, broken. "Everything. Nothing. The family is in shambles. My father..." He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up its usual perfect style. "My father tried to have you killed." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She stumbled, and Luca's hands shot out to steady her, gripping her arms. His touch was firm, but not painful. Even in his fury, he was careful with her. "The old man thought you were making me weak." Luca's jaw clenched. "He was wrong. You make me stronger." But he couldn't see that. Wouldn't see that. "What did you do?" Emma asked, though part of her already knew the answer. She could see it in the darkness swimming in his eyes, in the tension coiling through his body. "What I had to do." His hands slid up her arms to cup her face. "I protected what's mine. The old guard is gone. All of them. The ones who plotted against us, who thought they could take you from me. They're finished." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She should be horrified, should be running from this man who dealt in death and violence. But she understood now. This was his world, and he had chosen her over everything. Over family, over duty, over the empire he'd been groomed to inherit. "You didn't have to," she started, but he cut her off. "I did." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, the gentle touch at odds with the violence she knew those hands were capable of. "I would do it again. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "The cost means nothing," he interrupted. "Do you understand? Nothing means anything without you. I've lived in darkness my whole life, Emma. You're the only light I've ever known." His words shook her to her core. This was Luca stripped bare. No masks, no walls, just raw truth. She reached up, placing her hand over his where it rested on her cheek. His skin was warm, and she could feel him trembling slightly. "I thought I lost you," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "When I heard what they plan, I've never known fear like that. Never felt so out of control." Emma stepped closer, eliminating the last bit of space between them. She could feel his heart pounding through his shirt, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. "I'm here," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." The fury in his eyes shifted, transforming into something else, something possessive and desperate and consuming. His grip tightened fractionally on her face as he stared down at her. "You're mine, Emma, forever. No one will take you from me." Through the towering windows of the Moretti mansion's grand hall, flashes of gunfire illuminated the night like deadly fireworks. Emma's heart pounded against her ribs as she watched Luca move with lethal grace, his muscles coiled tight beneath his tailored suit. Blood splattered across the marble floors, turning the pristine white surface into a crimson canvas. "Stay behind me," Luca ordered, his voice carrying that familiar steel edge that brooked no argument. His broad shoulders blocked her view as another explosion rocked the building's foundation. The rival families had united against them, thinking they could overthrow the Moretti Empire while it was vulnerable. They hadn't counted on Luca's ruthless determination, or his rage. Emma pressed herself against a pillar, her fingers trembling as she gripped the cold stone. The sound of breaking glass and screams filled the air.
Luca's men moved like shadows through the chaos, executing his carefully laid plans with precision. "You think you can challenge me?" Luca's voice boomed across the hall. He stood over the rival family's leader, who was now on his knees, blood trickling from his split lip. "You think you can threaten what's mine?" The man spat blood onto the floor. "The Morettis are finished. The old guard won't stand for this." The crack of Luca's gunshot echoed through the hall. Emma flinched but didn't look away. She'd learned that weakness had no place in this world. The rival boss slumped forward, his threat dying with him. Luca turned to face the remaining men, his dark eyes burning with controlled fury. "Let this be a message," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Anyone who threatens my family, who threatens Emma," his gaze flickered to her for a moment, intense and possessive, "will meet the same fate." The remaining rival family members were rounded up, forced to their knees. Emma watched as Luca moved among them like a predator selecting his prey. His authority was absolute, his power undeniable. "Your choices are simple," he told them. "Pledge your loyalty to me or join your boss." He gestured to the body on the floor. "Choose wisely." One by one, they bowed their heads, murmuring oaths of allegiance. Emma could see the fear in their eyes, not just of dying, but of Luca himself. He had earned his nickname, the Beast, and tonight he proved why. When the last man had pledged his loyalty, Luca's men began clearing the hall. Bodies were removed, blood was cleaned, and slowly the chaos subsided. But the air remained charged with tension and power. Luca crossed the room to Emma, his steps measured and controlled. Despite the violence she'd witnessed, she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had seen beneath his savage exterior to the man who would burn the world to keep her safe. "It's done," he said, his voice softer now, meant only for her ears. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she leaned into his touch. "No one will ever threaten us again." Emma looked around the hall, taking in the evidence of the night's violence. "You're the king now," she whispered, understanding the weight of what had just happened. The old power structure had crumbled, and from its ashes, Luca had risen supreme. He pulled her closer, his arm sliding around her waist. "And you're my
"Queen," he said, his lips brushing against her ear. "Everything I've done, every life I've taken, was to keep you safe, to keep you with me." The last of Luca's men filed out, leaving them alone in the vast hall. Through the windows, the first hints of dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and purples. A new day was beginning, a new era in the underworld. Luca's empire was secure. His enemies were either dead or had sworn allegiance. And Emma had chosen her path. She had watched him fight for her, kill for her, risk everything to protect her. This dangerous, powerful man was hers, just as she was his. Emma stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. The night was alive with possibility, so different from the fear that had once consumed her in this very spot. Behind her, she heard Luca's measured footsteps approaching, and a small smile curved her lips. "Are you ready?" His deep voice resonated through the room. She turned to face him, taking in his imposing figure in a perfectly tailored black suit. Blood still stained his collar, a reminder of the violence that had brought them here. But Emma no longer flinched at the sight. This was their world now, for better or worse. "I am," she answered, smoothing down her own designer dress. The fabric felt like armor, the deep red color a statement of power. Gone was the timid event planner who had stumbled into this world by accident. In her place stood a woman who had learned to navigate the darkness. Luca's eyes darkened as he approached her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You've changed," he observed, his thumb tracing her jawline. "We both have," Emma replied, leaning into his touch. The electricity between them was still there, but it had evolved into something deeper, more dangerous. "Your enemies thought I was your weakness. They were wrong." A cruel smile played at the corners of Luca's mouth. They learned their lesson. His hand slid down to her neck, possessive but gentle. "Everyone who tried to tear us apart is gone now." Emma thought of Margaret's betrayal, of the rival families who had tried to use her against Luca. They had all underestimated her, assumed she was just another pawn in their game. That mistake had cost them everything. "The families are waiting," she reminded him, though she made no move to step away from his touch. "Let them wait," Luca growled, pulling her closer. "Tonight, we show them the new order. No more old rules, no more ancient vendettas." His eyes burned with intensity. "Just us, taking what's ours." Emma reached up, straightening his tie with practiced ease. "And what exactly is ours, Luca?" "Everything." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "The entire city if you want it. No one will dare challenge us now." The thought should have terrified her once. Now it sent a thrill down her spine. She had learned that power, when wielded correctly, could protect as well as destroy. And Luca had taught her how to wield it with precision. Together, they descended to the private dining room where the heads of the remaining families waited. Emma felt their eyes on her as she entered, saw the mixture of fear and respect in their gazes. They had witnessed what happened to those who crossed Luca Moretti, and what happened to those who underestimated his woman. Luca pulled out her chair at the head of the table, a gesture that spoke volumes to those assembled. She wasn't just his lover or his weakness. She was his equal, his partner in every sense of the word. "Gentlemen," Luca's voice carried across the room, commanding instant attention. "My father's way of doing business died with him. Tonight, we establish new rules." Emma watched as he laid out their vision for the future. No more senseless violence, no more petty feuds. Business would be conducted with precision and purpose. Those who couldn't adapt would be eliminated. Under the table, Luca's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. This was what they had fought for, not just survival, but the power to reshape their world. Emma squeezed his hand, remembering how far they'd come from that first terrifying meeting in Margaret's apartment. The fear was gone now, replaced by something far more potent. Love, yes, but also understanding. She understood now why Luca had done everything he had, why he had kept her close even when she fought against him. And he understood that her strength wasn't a threat to his power. It was the key to expanding it. As the meeting continued, Emma caught Luca's eye across the table. His expression softened for just a moment, a look reserved only for her. In that glance was everything they'd survived together. The betrayals, the violence, the passion that had consumed them both. The penthouse windows rattled as thunder rolled across the New York skyline. Emma stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass, watching lightning illuminate the dark clouds. Behind her, Luca's reflection appeared, his presence filling the room with that familiar tension she'd grown to crave. "You're thinking too hard again," he said,
his voice low and smooth like aged whiskey. Emma turned to face him, taking in his dangerous beauty. The perfectly tailored black suit, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, those eyes that had once terrified her but now set her soul on fire. "I'm thinking about everything that's changed," she said, lifting her chin. "About how I used to be the girl who helped old ladies cross the street. Now I'm the woman who helps you run an empire built on blood." Luca's lips curved into that predatory smile she knew so well. He closed the distance between them, his fingers trailing along her jaw. "Do you regret it?" "That's what I've been asking myself," Emma admitted. Her hand found his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat beneath expensive fabric. "I should be horrified by what we did to Margaret, to your father's old guard. I should feel guilty
about the bodies we left behind. But you don't, Lucas stated. It wasn't a question. Emma's laugh was soft and dangerous. No, I don't. That's what scares me sometimes. When did I become this person? You were always this person. Luca's hands slid down to her waist, pulling her closer. You just needed someone to show you how powerful you could be. The thunder crashed again, and Emma remembered the night everything changed. The night she stopped being a victim and became a queen. She'd watched Luca execute his father's betrayers without flinching. She'd helped him plan the takeover of rival territories, her event planning skills proving surprisingly useful for organizing their new empire. I used to think you were the monster, Emma said, her fingers tracing the scar on his neck, a reminder of their last battle. But now I understand. The real monsters were the ones who thought they could cage us, control us. Luca's grip tightened possessively. You've become everything I knew you could be. Stronger, deadlier. His voice dropped to a whisper. Perfect. I remember when you told me I belonged to you, Emma said, her eyes meeting his. You were wrong, you know. We belong to each other. This empire, we built it together. From the ashes of the old world, Luca agreed, pride evident in his voice. Emma stepped back, walking to his desk where reports from their various operations lay scattered. The Martinez cartel is pushing for a meeting, she said, all business now. They think because I'm a woman, I'll be more sympathetic to their cause. Luca's dark chuckle filled the room. Their mistake. Exactly. Emma picked up a crystal paperweight, admiring how it caught the lightning's flash. They don't understand that I'm the one who suggested taking their shipping routes in the first place. She remembered how they'd underestimated her at first. The pretty little hostage who'd somehow caught the beast's eye. None of them had expected her to become his equal, to match his ruthlessness with her own calculated ambition. The old families still whisper about us. Luca moved behind her, his breath hot against her neck. They call us monsters. Let them whisper. Emma turned in his arms. They're just afraid because they never saw us coming. The beast and his queen. My queen, Luca corrected, his eyes darkening with possession and pride. The woman who brought an empire to its knees and helped me rebuild it stronger. Emma smiled, remembering the frightened girl she'd once been. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true power came from embracing the darkness within. She'd stopped running from it long ago. Now, she and Luca ruled their world together, their love as violent and beautiful as the storm raging outside. Luca watched her with knowing eyes, seeing the deadly grace she'd developed under his guidance. You're just as ruthless as I am, Emma. And she knew it was true. The morning sun cast long shadows across the penthouse's marble floors as Emma stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below her, the city was waking up, unaware of the power shifts that had transformed its underworld. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the pristine surface. Behind her, Luca's reflection appeared. He moved with that familiar predatory grace, but his eyes held warmth reserved only for her. His strong arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Having second thoughts?" he murmured against her ear. Emma leaned into his embrace. "No, just thinking about how far we've come." She turned in his arms to face him. "Remember when you first brought me here? I was terrified of you." A shadow crossed his face. "You had every reason to be." His fingers traced her jawline. "I was cruel, cold. I thought keeping you prisoner was the only way." "And now?" Emma challenged, raising an eyebrow. "Now I know better." His voice dropped lower, possessive. "You're not my prisoner anymore. You're my queen." Emma's hand found the scar on his chest, hidden beneath his black shirt, a reminder of the bullet he'd taken protecting her during the final battle. "I chose this life, Luca. I chose you." The city continued its morning routine below them, streams of traffic flowing like blood through veins. Emma remembered the first time she'd witnessed Luca's violence, how it had horrified her. Now she understood the necessity of it, the delicate balance of power that kept their world turning. "You've changed me," Luca admitted, his usual stern expression softening. "I never thought I could trust anyone the way I trust you." "Because I proved I could handle the darkness?" Emma asked, thinking of how she'd helped him dismantle the rival families, how she'd learned to navigate the treacherous waters of their world. "Because you never tried to change the darkness. You embraced it, made it your own." His hands tightened on her waist. "Do you regret any of it?" Emma thought about Margaret's betrayal, the blood that had been shed, the choices that had led them here. "No," she said firmly. "This is who we are now." Luca's eyes darkened with pride and desire. "You're just as ruthless as I am, Emma. You've proven that time and time again." She smiled, remembering how she'd helped him strategize, how she'd learned to read people's intentions, how she'd become an equal partner in their dangerous dance. "I had a good teacher." The sun climbed higher, bathing them in golden light. Below, their empire stretched out before them. Every street, every building, every shadow held their influence. What had once terrified Emma now felt like home. Luca turned her to face the window again, his chest pressed against her back. "Look at it all, Emma. Everything the light touches is ours." She leaned back into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Our kingdom." "Built on blood and bullets," he acknowledged, "but also on trust. On us." Emma watched a private helicopter land on a distant rooftop, one of their legitimate businesses. She'd helped transform many of their operations, bringing them into the light while maintaining their grip on the shadows. It was a delicate balance, but they'd mastered it together. "Do you remember telling me I belonged to you?" she asked, thinking of those early days of captivity. "I was wrong," Luca admitted, surprising her. "We belong to each other." Emma turned to face him, reaching up to trace the scar on his jaw, another battle mark from their journey. "The beast and his queen." His eyes flashed at the old nickname. "You tamed the beast." "No," Emma corrected him. "I joined him." The city stretched endlessly before them, a testament to their power, their love, their shared darkness. Emma had come so far from the naive event planner who'd helped an elderly woman. Now she stood as an equal to one of the most dangerous men in the world. Luca whispered, "You're mine forever, Emma. This world, our world, belongs to us." They kissed, and the sun rose over the city, signaling the beginning of their new life together. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.